welcome to the virtual podcast. It's great to have you with us. This is the podcast from the platform connecting the community with founders, industry experts, and startup greats. With over $190 million raised across 240 successful campaigns, we certainly know a thing or two about capital raising. But remember, the information and discussion in this podcast is for informational purposes and should not be considered as advice or a recommendation to invest. So please do your own research and always consider to the general CSF risk warning and offer document before investing. And today we welcome Adam Guskich, the CEO and one of the founders at Medigrowth, a leading Australian medical cannabis company which took the virtual platform by storm. They raised a massive $3.4 million here on the virtual platform just a few months ago. And today's catch-up is all about hearing how that actual raise was for Adam and the team, what it was like and how they nailed it so successfully, and not to mention what they've been up to since, including his trips over to the US, learning about the different products over in the United States and the Canadian market. And we also get to catch up and get an insight onto what's happened with the medical trials, which hold such promise and such an opportunity for Medigrowth here in Australia and potentially globally. Let's dive straight in. Thanks so much for joining us. Adam, welcome to the virtual podcast. Fab to have you here.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
It's fab to have you. So a bit of a dreary day here in Melbourne, but certainly not a dreary story when it comes to Medigrowth in terms of the success you had last year on the platform. But we want to focus the conversation today really around what comes next. Really, obviously, it was a huge fanfare of success and you did an extraordinary job in terms of your raise. Before we dive into, what 2024 looks like for you, how was the raise for you upon reflection? It's been a few months now. So, what are your kind of top takeaways from it?
Absolutely. Look, the raise was an incredible ride. And I remember some of the advice we had from the virtual team, just as we started to launch into the early stages was that, really it is quite an intense period for founders. And I think that is some very critical advice. It was a very intense period.
Yeah.
Huge amount of preparation, huge amount of work that went into all facets, but we did get a great result and it's really allowed us to push forward into 24 with a very strong position.
If we can talk the real reality of it, like how much other business was getting done whilst you were in the race? Was it just full focus for a short period or how did you kind of actually find it?
Look, we certainly crammed many, many hours into a 24-hour period, wearing our Medigrowth hat. So we did have business as usual, but we were very well prepared in terms of the work that we'd done prior to hitting the go button on launch day.
Yep.
So we felt we were quite well positioned, notwithstanding that we then spent a lot of time in terms of investor engagement and really just comms with investors and potential investors during that period as well.
Okay, cool. And just for my understanding, like what was the lead in to it? Like it sounded like you obviously knew you were going to be raising capital. Like what kind of time frame did you allow to prepare and that kind of thing?
Yeah, look, we'd been preparing probably for some time in terms of just a broad sort of conversation with the team at Virtual, and then really a few months prior, we started to work towards just putting our offer document together and a host of collateral and assets that were all part of the raise. So
cool.
Realistically, probably, a pretty intense sort of 3-month period prior to alongside business as usual.
It's a big ask, isn't it? It's a big ask of founders when you've got a lot going on. Like it's, I hear a lot of founders talk about how it's like it's a whole new job you have to take on as the founder, there's the business and then there's the capital raise. Upon reflection, like how did you find navigating a community versus trying to pitch one venture capitalist or a couple of, highly sophisticated experts in the cannabis space, say?
Yeah, look, just a very interesting process. I think having very clear messaging in our pitch video, for example, I think it gives you that scalability of voice to really communicate your vision to a whole community out there. I actually found the process very enjoyable because we did engage with a lot of people, a lot of investors, a lot of potential investors, and build a very good community to support Medigrowth. So I think that was really important as part of that sort of strategy moving forward to have some brand awareness and a community around us.
Do you think your type of business suits a community funded raise?
I think it does. It's a yes and no answer. I mean, in a way, there's two divisions to our business, and there's the very community focused and patient driven side of the business, and then there's the clinical side of the business. So they are somewhat different worlds, but certainly the patient focused and distribution side of the business relies on very much that patient first approach.
Yep. I'm intrigued. Post raise, you raised 3.4 million. If I'm not, sorry if I'm correct.
No, that's correct. Yeah.
Yep. And I saw recently, you've spent some time popping over to the US. Obviously, huge market in terms of this cannabis play. So, for those who are less familiar, just give us a short intro to Medigrowth in terms of what your positioning is and the type of business you actually.
Yeah. We've now been around we've incorporated the business in very late 2017. So we have been around for a number of years, and we weren't the first, but we were probably within a very early cohort of businesses that were in the space here in Australia. So our business has evolved, like many in the space, over time. And really where we're at today is a distribution-based supply business. So we have a number of medicinal cannabis products available to Aussie patients. And we have an R&D side of the business as well. So a very strong collaboration with Deakin University, who we've worked closely with on a number of projects.
Cool. And so you're trying to be what would be a comparative in terms of maybe a different sector? You're trying to be the Colgate of the of medicinal cannabis, or?
Well, it's an interesting space. I think the truth is, in a rapidly evolving landscape and a new industry, it's a non-linear path. So our pathway has had many turns, since inception. I think where we're trying to position ourselves now is a recognised brand leader in the medicinal space. So we would like to ensure that doctors are aware of our brands and our mission. And hopefully that reflects in great outcomes for patients. And probably secondary to that, then you've got the R&D side of the business that probably is a little bit more pharmaceutical approach. So ultimately there's ambition to have products registered under a pharmaceutical landscape that have a cannabis or cannabinoid formulation.
It sounds like a lot of money, right? 3.5 mil. And it's not an insignificant number, but in the pharmaceutical world, it's like a drop in the ocean, right?
Correct, yeah.
And everything, and I'm no expert in this space, but everything in trying to get it legalized, trying to get it to a point where you're certifiable, like quote unquote safe or whatever that is. That sounds like a horribly expensive process. Would that be fair?
Look, certainly the traditional clinical trial pathways to register any medicine, whether it's cannabis related or otherwise, is an incredible lengthy and expensive process. The reality for medicinal cannabis in Australia, currently it's a special access scheme or unapproved medicine. So there are pathways for patients to access those medicines, and there's a lot of data already established in Australia for CBD, for example, to be actually an incredibly safe medicine and very efficacious and proving therapeutic benefit for a lot of patients.
Yep.
I think on the flip side, the pathway to that clinical approach, definitely longer term, bigger bank book, and likely, partnerships and more funding required for, really pushing into that landscape.
So it's a very collaborative space by the sounds of things. It's not just like Medigrowth going on their own, charging it through and having to take it all on. Is that right? When it comes
Absolutely, yeah. I think industry-wise, there's a lot of collaboration and a lot of interest from government and university on the research and R&D landscape. So we've been found a very receptive audience to our endeavours to engage both government and university to try and really push forward to get that clinical data set that really most doctors want to see.
Right. And is that data set what turns medical people around when it comes to like the quote unquote stigma of this space?
I think absolutely doctors and medical professionals love to see clinical data because that's really their training basis. That's how they learn to prescribe medicines with a clear indication and a clear medicine for that indication. So yes is the answer, but equally we're seeing a lot of doctors come around purely from experience where they're prescribing medicinal cannabis and seeing genuine results for people that often they haven't seen in the traditional pharmaceutical landscape. So we've had a number of experiences like that.
And one criticism often thrown at the medical system is that it's not about wellness, it's about kind of, what's the word? Just kind of stopgap, almost kind of band-aid solutions. Antihistamines are a good example, right? It doesn't actually solve your hay fever. Just stops you feeling the symptoms, which is, I guess, helpful in the short term, but it never really kind of solves the real core of the issue. So does cannabis, as I understand it, kind of has the ability to actually heal as well, right? It's more, can touch into wellness. Am I on the right lines or not?
I think there's definitely a crossover into that holistic wellness scenario for many medicinal cannabis patients. And again, there's a host of different formulations and compounds that fall into that medicinal cannabis world as well. So in various parts of the world, CBD, for example, very much is in the wellness sphere. Here it's still a prescribed Schedule 4 medicine. So I think, there's a clear place for both really clinical medicines and things that do fall or cross over into that holistic wellness as well.
Yeah, okay, cool. So tell us about the US. You went to Las Vegas, I think it was. I always find it funny that we host conferences there. So first of all, how was your experience? Was that your first time there?
No, it's actually my fourth time to Vegas.
Okay.
Once many moons ago in some early world travels as a spectator, and three conferences now under the Medigrowth banner, just to really engage and learn with what's happening in other parts of the world.
And do you go as an exhibitor or do you go as what's the word?
Just as a delegate sort of in this case. So, it's a immense conference. I can't think of the square footage of the arena there, but really three days to sort of really try and walk through, and you're only still touching the surface of the exhibitors. So it is quite an amazing learning opportunity.
And that speaks to the size of the US market in terms of it's not just medicinal use there. It's obviously the regulations are different. I'm going to say it's the audience's benefit, but it's mainly mine.
Yeah.
Just tell me about the differences between the Australian market and the US. How does that vary?
So Australia is a purely medical market. Basically, any medicinal cannabis needs to be prescribed by a doctor or medical professional under either a special access scheme, or those prescribers can be an authorised prescriber where they're very au fait with certain conditions, and they get a TGA approval basically to prescribe under their discretion. In North America, or the States specifically, there's a adult use or recreational market that's legal as well. It's still not legal across the entire US. It is a state by state positioning. So there are some states that still run on a medical model, but Vegas, for example, is a fully legal adult use market.
Okay. And because of those differences then, like who's exhibiting at this conference? It must be, I'm guessing it's not just bong pipes and...
No, look, everything from very high-tech cultivation and manufacturing suppliers and specialists through to everything in the supply chain between. So from packaging, from cultivation and suppliers.
Yep.
And really, as I say, every step in the supply chain, there's someone there to chat to should you have an interest.
And for you, like how vertically integrated are you as a manufacturer? Are you buying, you got land that you own, you're cultivating it from there, or how kind of?
So we're fully licensed by the Federal Office of Drug Control. So that was our early journey in the market here in Australia, which took nearly 2 years to achieve the ODC licensing back in 2018 sort of to 2019. So in terms, we don't grow our own product. We're utilising cultivation partners and manufacturing partners for product currently.
Okay.
We do have a research greenhouse that we work have worked with Deakin University over time. So that's an asset that we do continue to engage with and have opportunities with. But we're finding for our model now really utilising cultivation partners that can take the heavy lifting on that work, and we can concentrate really on the patient engagement.
Okay, cool. So is that your point of difference, would you say? Because you're closer to the patient side?
It's a little bit of crossover. I think having great partners in cultivation and manufacturing ensures that we've got good products, and we're part of the virtual raise was to increase that product line. So we've got opportunities for a broader range of indications and delivery and dose technologies. So I think really our position allows us to focus on direct engagement with patients, and longer term, really on that R&D space that we see quite a big opportunity for as well.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, for example, the autism trial, the clinical trial that we're working with Deakin University on,
right.
That's last year just finished up into its phase 2 status. So that's something that we're looking now into this year, really to push through to the next phase, ultimately obviously with the right outcome and the right data set, but ultimately looking to register those medicines as part of a TGA approval.
So just talk us through that phasing. What does phase 1 mean? Or what is that what does phase 1, 2 look like?
So those early phases are really fundamentally looking at safety and efficacy for patients. So looking at the dosing guidelines, ensuring that, the patients are tolerating the product well. And that data probably arguably already exists globally because CBD has been recognised as a very safe compound even by the World Health Organization. So, but nonetheless still needs to be fully verified through that process.
Okay. And so phase 2 is what? The broader, it's not going to, it's safe. We figured out a certain level of dosage. What's phase 2 look like?
So they then take that sort of, it's a dual phase, like a double-blind placebo-controlled trial. So they do a crossover trial where the kids in this case, they're 5 to 12-year-old kids, take placebo in one journey, active in the other. At the end of that nearly year-long period, as it turned out, just to work through beginning to end with the crossovers and the break in between. By that stage, they've analysed both cohorts and really have established that safety and efficacy across that phase 1 and 2. Phase 3 then really is just building on a bigger cohort of patients, a bigger or wider demographic, and often multi-sites.
And where you, just on the patient piece, especially maybe the first line, let's start with the headline. What's the key outcome you're seeing around autism? What's the benefit to someone who's autistic?
So our trial is looking at behavioural and neurodevelopmental challenges within the autistic community, within that sort of age range, 5 to 12-year-old kids. So the outcome really that we're looking for there is decreased anxiety, the parental stress indicators. So broadly as a family, often there's a range of stresses that come with managing some of that behaviour. So lower parental stress scales and just broader behavioural improvements in autistic.
Okay. Wow. That's actually, I had a friend of mine who talked about his toddler who was using some sort of CBD oil at bedtime. He said it's like day and night in terms of the application of it between the child. So, so phase 2, more sites, more broader rollout. What's the kind of time frame on that in terms of the next step piece?
So those protocols for phase 3 are currently being developed at present.
Right.
So that's really probably to the middle part of this year, still with some steps to go through the approvals and the Human Research Ethics Committee and a few steps along that line. But over the course of this year, we would be expecting that all things considered, that should be coming into fruition.
And if that does come through, what does that open up for you? What's the market opportunity there?
Look, the opportunity, it's incredible when you look at the stats on autism, both in Australia and globally. I mean, it's an issue. And I mean, even anecdotally in my own kids' school, I can see it firsthand when you look at, a cohort of kids there that are still in a mainstream school, but often have aides and carers that are working alongside them to support. So we see a huge opportunity here in Australia, but globally, the market is a huge opportunity.
So it sounds like given the medical oversight, licensing, etc., like it sounds like a nightmare, actually speaking.
It's certainly there's a regulatory burden.
That's the more political PC way of putting it. So, but the opportunity there is that actually it could potentially open up global markets. Is that right? Is that my
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
And that's very much our intent, really. We've looked at our sort of dual pillar business, having the current distribution and unapproved medicine sales to very much build a revenue pipeline to support that really bigger picture opportunity, which is potentially those global markets for registered medicines.
Got you. Okay. And that would be wild, right, in terms of the size of that. And are you aiming, like, are you trying to get a broader range of products, or are you mainly interested on just picking up like a few? Like, what's the segment you're going for?
So the autism came about because there was an existing relationship with Deakin and existing school of psychology and some global leaders in that that area. So that was very much a good first base of investigation, and particularly given the fact that CBD was the intent there, was a good soft start just to introducing that clinical trial program. Beyond that, we're very interested in the mental health space and oncology for next steps.
Let's talk headwinds for the industry more broadly. What do you see coming up for 2024 and future? What are you hearing from the US partners as well, given that the ticket size, the investment over there is so significant? Can you actually, let me pause the macro. Let's just talk about micro for a second. You're, like, as a developer or manufacturer down here in a small market, how do you feel about those bigger players out there? Do you feel like they're a threat? Do they feel like, are they kind of helpful because they're not going after the niches like yourself? Or
look, I think there's always competition. There's always players doing things that we're not privy to in a market. We feel very privileged to be a part of the Australian market because it is somewhat protected in comparison to other parts of the world. We've got a CBD industry, for example, that's still prescription basis. Some would argue that's, compared to other parts of the world where it's broadly more accessible. Some might argue that, that is a little bit onerous, but it ensures that there's full medical oversight for patients. And I think it's just so important when you look at some of these kids, for example, that, there's a whole host of intricacies that patients need managed with some professional oversight. So I think that little bit of protectionism here for our model here in Australia is really interesting because it allows there's some barriers to entry for overseas players. Not to say that, look, already there are many here. It's a competitive landscape, but we see opportunity for companies like us to really propel based on the fact that we're collaborating locally. We've got great university and government support, and we see that as a really important stepping stone to try and then move beyond the borders in the coming years.
Okay, but really it's almost like a defensible moat, which is very helpful as you're getting bigger and waiting for things to come through trials, etc. And then so you can't get smashed straight away, as it were.
Exactly, yeah. And it's a head start. I mean, there are large multinational pharmaceutical companies that are very involved in cannabinoid medicine. Some of those, notably with multiple sclerosis and rare forms of childhood epilepsy, for example. those companies that have been able to bring out the clinical data set are now, in an incredible position based on those very defendable and quite unique medicines for often quite unique indications.
Cool. Okay. Interesting. So let's go macro then. So headwinds for the industry, biggest challenges. What do you think 2024, 2025 brings?
It's an interesting one. I mean, there's been, because we have been around now for many years and we've seen a lot of players in the market, we've seen a lot of the early ASX and global public markets with, quite a bullish sector. And, then there was certainly a downturn in terms of the public involvement in some of those companies. So I think ongoing in the industry broadly, there's a capital headwind for those companies that need significant capital to keep operating. Again, we feel we're very well positioned in that landscape because we're not bound by the huge capex that some of those bigger players and organisations are trying to sort of keep within fundamentally. So,
and why are they so? Why you mean from an expense piece, or they just set up differently? Or?
Yeah, many of those players have huge cultivation greenhouses, for example.
Okay.
That, just in terms of the day overheads on day, month, week, and annually. We're a very lean operation, lean team. Not to say, we are certainly scaling and building, but we are fortunate not to be in that situation where we're bound by those overheads.
And are you seeing those companies start to lay people off, or because I know that was a key part of your raise, right? You wanted to bring in and build out that team of yours.
Yeah.
So you're seeing that really as a potential opportunity, bringing some of that expertise from those companies as they start to.
Look, there's a great skill set out there, and it's a very nuanced skill set in the medicinal cannabis industry.
Yeah,
it's certainly there's a crossover from traditional pharmaceutical, but there's a steep learning curve even for pharmaceutical executives and professionals as well. So,
why is that?
Just a learning curve, probably on the nuances of the varying medicines and varying medicinal cannabis, where they don't have that data spec sheet that you can almost go in and sort of present by rote. It's this, and this. I think there's a huge education piece for doctors that has to come into play with medicinal cannabis that potentially doesn't quite work the same in traditional pharma because of that sort of evidence data.
Okay.
I think looking at some of those people out there from our perspective, we're a growing team. We're looking for amazing people to come along the journey with us.
Okay. And out of interest, what's the labour market like at the moment for trying to find these super niche-y, specialised? It sounds pricey.
Well, it's an interesting proposition. I mean, we're incredibly excited by building our team. We've been founder-led, have worn many hats for now many years. So bringing on expertise is really exciting. And, we're trying to really find the expertise alongside the culture fit. And, everyone tells me that that's so important in that sort of labour market because there are some incredible people out there, but they need to be able to work alongside us and share the vision, which is really our job now to try and find those people.
And it maybe it's too early to say, but how's it going? Like, how are you actually finding that was the US trip part of that?
Not so much on finding staff. That was more, product and procurement and learnings, I guess, from that part of the world. We do have very good relationships in Canada because Todd, my business partner, is a long-standing Australian resident, but he's a Canadian expat from forever ago, 25 years or so back. So we do have a very good network in that part of the world, and we probably will bring on someone in the short term that will add, some expertise that from that part of the world may help us as well.
Because I'm guessing, given the nicheness, you'd be looking to these external markets as a labour pool to bring in expertise you might not be able to bring to the party, or not, perhaps.
Well, I think certainly in the cultivation world,
Okay.
that would be very relevant.
Yep.
And I know just from the industry here that's been certainly a challenge for a lot of the cultivators to find and or train the relevant expertise in a very nuanced industry on cultivation. It's not growing tomatoes, is what everyone keeps telling me. I mean, it's a very specialized skill set, and often to do it on a small scale is vastly different to doing it in a 5-acre greenhouse, for example.
Right.
So I think that's the challenge that globally is still there, and that's what even in Canada that a lot of the early players saw, that they had head cultivators that were very experienced growers, small scale, coming from a grey or a black market, could grow amazing product, but then couldn't replicate that in scale.
Got you. And I guess that's going to be your, like, in terms of purity of products, like that's going to be a major potential kind of choke point to your growth, I would imagine. Is that right?
Well, the consistency of supply is incredibly important. So firstly, the quality of the product, the active components and potency of the product are all integral to have that consistency. But then the supply itself is integral, because often patients are having a result, have been on a medication for, in many cases, many months or more, and if supply runs out, it's not as easy as just finding another product, because of all the nuances in dried flower, for example. There's a whole host of different potencies, cannabinoids, and others that can really make the difference.
And as I understand it, this would be quite significantly different from pharmaceuticals, because it's all drug-based, it's all artificial compounds, etc. Is that fair?
It's definitely fair on the flower side. It's a unique product to grow, and the reality is that not every batch comes out the same as the last, even under the same conditions. There are fluctuations in active cannabinoids. So looking at how that's managed can be quite a challenge for cultivators.
Sounds a bit like tomatoes. But
it's a little bit like tomatoes.
So maybe the analogy or the similarities, that there's more than you might. It appears. But the okay, so sounds like a big year in terms of what's coming up. You're hiring a big team. You've got you're cashed up, which is excellent. Do you think we might see you again here at Birchall in terms of for future raises, and what kind of time frame do you see you might need capitalization again, or how are you thinking about that?
Certainly keeping a close eye on those opportunities, and really looking at, over the course of this year, just narrowing down on our commitments as part of the raise, and ensuring that we've really worked towards those commitments. And already, in the last few months, we've really pushed forward on a host of the initiatives that were part of our use of funds. So we're working hard to ensure that use of capital is deployed as intended, smartly, and for a result. And at some point, likely there will be another raise. It's really just a matter of sort of probably scaling out over the first 6 months of this year, and just having a few things in place to look at how have our launches gone for our new products, for example. At what point have we built a team, which is going to start with probably, some sales people to drive the revenue and the education piece for the products and for the prescribers. So I think, to answer the question, over the course of this year, potentially we could be having another chat and just seeing really what we need to do to continue to grow. And that's the intent, that we want to ensure that we're not in a position where we have great plans, but we don't have the capital.
Yeah, sure. And I think it's, as much the headwinds around capital are going to be a constraint for some, I feel like it's an opportunity for others. And I feel like you've got a strong base. I was talking to Emily just before, in terms of the response from the community. I think it was around 2,000 people who took part of your raise. So it's, obviously it's a great response. They obviously back your model, and they can see a lot of promise in it. So very exciting times for Medigrowth in terms of, and a sector which, it's got applications, as you said. If you can reduce anxiety, well, that's like, massive
massive.
Yeah, for sure. And the interesting thing was even throughout the virtual campaign, the engagement with a lot of the investors was that many of those were investing because they'd seen firsthand how incredible, the product can be. So we've had a number of investors that, I've had personal conversations with that they're investing because they believe in the product. They want to support the industry broadly. As you say, they liked our model and saw the opportunity as an investment. But I think beyond that, there is a big community that really wants to drive home taking that stigma away from cannabis and just, like it is in some other parts of the world, have it really deemed to be something that shouldn't be stigmatized and does have a real place in medicine.
Yeah, interesting. It's it's got such potential, right? And I think if you can get past the legalization piece or the kind of antisocial piece, maybe. But it sounds like a really like a blue ocean, say, in some regards of opportunity and in terms of wellness for people. So, Adam, it's been awesome to have you on here. Thank you so much for coming in to this really wet and miserable day here in Melbourne. But it might be beautiful sunshine by the time we leave, who knows? And thanks so much. We're really excited to follow the journey of Medigrowth, and thanks for using the virtual platform. Just maybe want to leave, what would be your one token or a piece of advice to a founder considering raising capital on the platform, or even just raising capital, period, perhaps? What would be your nugget?
I think it would be prepared and don't underestimate the power of the offer document and the complexity of an offer document to really ensure investors are fully educated on your mission, because we found it a really interesting process. We've had offer documents before and we have pitched before, but really getting that concise out of my head or our collective heads onto paper to ensure that somebody that doesn't know anything about our business can quickly understand the model is actually a lot harder than it may seem.
For sure. And just on that preparation piece, so it took you 3 months, you said, but it sounds like you've been really kind of working on that since you started in terms of solidifying what the offer is and point of difference, etc.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's interesting just how the journey continues to evolve, and really from the early stages in an industry where there was really no industry, no patients, and companies that were unlicensed and really no different to us, all really just trying to sort of find their place in a new industry. That's been part of our journey to say, well, where do we want to sit in an industry? And that has evolved really over time. Originally back in 2017, we were applying for licenses really with intent to cultivate and to manufacture. And we do still have ambitions for manufacturing. We are fully licensed. We do have a greenfield site. We've got very strong support for that site. But ultimately, you flex with the opportunities that you're given, and we've worked with the capital available to us as well, and we feel that that's put us in a pretty good position to really come into the market in 2024 when the market is actually really there, where there wasn't much of a market back in 2017, for example.
Yeah, it takes a long time, doesn't it? It's can be painful when you're bleeding edge type of personality.
Well, nothing happens quickly enough, and that still happens today. I'm an incredibly motivated person and incredibly impatient person at the same time, because as a founder, you're always trying to make things happen quicker than probably is humanly possible, but continue to try.
I feel like it's not dissimilar to growing a child or nurturing a child in some regards, because it's kind of like I've got a 3-year-old. I'm just like, come on, like, when can we go on a bike ride? And just like and it's that kind of impatience / which you kind of have to go, okay, it's development, trust the process, it's okay. So it's I'm not sure if you would agree with that. Kind of like you've
totally
got 3,
agree.
so you're,
I'm
a mentee in this regard. So
it's a journey, and I keep reminding myself of that when we're looking at blocks of period. Often I say to myself, "Oh, nothing's happening quickly enough." But every 3 months or 6 months or 12 months, you look back at what you've achieved over that time, and you actually realize you've achieved a huge amount.
It's extraordinary, yeah.
So, I do remind myself of that really we need to look long term. And your analogy on raising kids is exactly the same. There's a whole host of different tranches of kids' lives where you have to put the work in, and then you get to an outcome, and then you have to put more work in.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Adam. Awesome. Well, I think let's leave it there. It's been a pleasure to have you on. We'd love to have you back on, maybe down the track.
Absolutely.
Hear about progress and as things play out. Very exciting times for Medigrowth. And yeah, thanks for being here, Adam.
Thank you, Michael. It's been a pleasure.